Welcome everybody. Welcome to our series of webinars sponsored by IABAC. And our speaker for the day is Mrs. Gretchen Stewart, and she'll be taking on the topic of the role of women in AI, where diversity is critical to dealing with bias. And let me give you a brief introduction of the speaker for the day. Gretchen is a chief data scientist in the public sector, and she has a business and data analytics certificate with distribution from Harvard Business Analytics program. Her focus is on scaling solutions for customers and partners for all enterprise and government customers in the Americas. She's played an extensive role in the public sector business development, working with the US Air Force, state and local governments. She has advocated successful ways to embrace the benefits of technology to all our customers. In the classroom, her focus is on digital learning that ensures students are both college and career ready. Working closely with the customers, she has partnered with Intel's education ecosystem on architecture designs, on data center options, on security solutions, on deep learning opportunities, and on high performance computer research. So over to you, Gretchen.
Thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on what time zone you're all in. And as it was just said, I'm the chief data scientist for our public sector, which means I spend every day working with customers. So I just wanted to say first, thank you so much for the opportunity. My goal today is to set some context for AI past, present, and future, kind of through the lens of my journey into AI, also Intel's focus on democratizing AI, and the critical need for diversity, sprinkled, of course, with, because I'm a data scientist, data, facts, and some resources. So again, thank you so much, and let's jump in. So when we think about data science, let's say, where did AI come from? It did not, leap from a single player chess game straight into driving, self-driving cars. The field has a long history rooted in, honestly, military science and statistics, with contributions from philosophy, psychology, math, and cognitive sciences. Honestly, I'm a math major. So for me, many of the algorithms are ones that I learned in school. And honestly, having the networking and the compute and the storage just makes it so much more able to have artificial intelligence and the large amounts of data be able to come up with answers so much faster than originally was able to be done. So artificial intelligence, honestly, as I said, was set out to make computers more useful and more capable of independent reasoning. And most historians trace the birth of artificial intelligence to a research project at Dartmouth College in 1956. So yes, AI is exploding today, but it has deep roots back in the 50s and 60s. And they were exploring topics around problem solving, looking at symbolic methods. And then in the 60s, the Department of Defense and a number of Department of Defenses around the world looked at this as a way to work usefully and create computers to help them, and focus on training them to really mimic human reasoning. So today we've got a lot of pattern matching and other things like that that are being done. And we still are working towards neuromorphic computing, i.e. that being how to really mimic the brain and self-learning, just like our brains do. While machine learning is something that I deal with a lot, it's based on the idea that machines could be able to learn and adapt through experience. So AI really refers to the broader idea where machines can execute tasks really smartly, and AI applies machine learning, deep learning, and other techniques to solve actual problems. Again, just to set the context. So why now? Why AI? I wanted to give the broader context of the fact that the UN, in their global goals around sustainable development, emphasize that science, technology, and innovation are critical in the pursuit of these ambitious targets. Rapid advancements in technology which have only really emerged in the past decade, such as Internet of Things, blockchain, advanced network connectivity. You think about the fact that there are over 1 billion connected devices today. Late last night, there was a note out for anybody who has an Apple phone, an Apple Watch like I do, and any other Apple products that someone had been able to hack in, and there's now a security download that everybody needs to do on your watches, your Macs, your iPhones, etc. So it's definitely something that's out there, and no innovation is expected to be honestly more pervasive and transformative than AI and machine learning. There have been studies from Deloitte and McKinsey and others that have found that artificial intelligence could add around 16% to the global economy by 2030, which is not that far away. And that is about $13 trillion. And empowering and democratizing AI is critical. It is not only revolutionary, but it's increasing the central foundation upon which the next generation of technology is built. As an example, at Intel, we are using machine learning and other capabilities to help us better design and better have factory yield and other things throughout the entire manufacturing process at Intel, from the beginning of the development of our next generation processors all the way through to the manufacturing of those. We are deploying AI and machine learning throughout the entire ecosystem. The pace of change and scale does have the potential to create some risk, though. As an example, I just talked about what's going on with Apple. So in sessions like today, that bring together people like yourselves, entrepreneurs, people that are looking at different design features, usability designers, human factors engineers, data scientists, students of all ages, races, and gender, is how we're going to ensure and enable the best future for not only ourselves, our children, and their children. I'm really delighted to have the time and have been asked to talk today. So I want to step back just a little bit and talk about my journey. I honestly was, when I was 17 years old, I was hit by a car. And when that happened, I came out, I was honestly in a medically induced coma. And when I came out of that coma, I was 5 years of age. And as I repatterned my brain, I became really fascinated with how that works. Always been a person who loved math, and so continued to do that, but really started to look at the combination of math and neuroscience, and how do you really marry those two potentially to be able to solve some of the really hardest problems on the planet. But there's always going to be a human in the loop. In terms of automation, I think there's definitely some things that will be automated where you don't need a human in the loop, so to speak, but you still need somebody to monitor and manage and ensure that things are going on. So as you think about my journey, again, math, and then I also have a master's in business, and then went back to school to really hone my skills, data skills at Harvard through the analytic program. It really is important for people to know that you don't have to have a PhD in data science, that you can be someone who has a really good understanding of the domain that you're in, but that really, if it's something that you want to do, I think the first thing is, take a deep breath. Imagine what the world would be like if artificial intelligence was everywhere, and that you had the freedom to maybe do more of what you like to do, because some of the drudgery of the work that maybe you're having to do every day can be automated. So what comes to mind probably is that there are things that you don't want to do, as I said. So again, it reminds me of how I became really fascinated going through that process when I was a kid, and then really looking at supercomputers and understanding how they solve really hard societal problems, climate change, looking at weather patterns, drug discovery, cancer cures, how you find new oil deposits and more. These are just ways that the systems and researchers were able to, and had already been using algorithms to mimic human reasoning and automation, as I mentioned earlier. So when you think about the discovery itself, here's an example. Bright Skies Technology, which is based in Egypt, is a company that uses many Intel products, but specifically leveraged one of Intel's toolkits to build what's called reverse time migration. RTM is what's used to help geoscientists and geologists and energy companies deal with seismic image processing. This is reservoir analysis, trying to find and understand onshore and offshore oil and gas basins. And in doing that, what they were able to do, leveraging the technology that Intel has, was not be able to have some code reuse, but really looking and ensuring that we're able to deal with the exploration and find those kinds of things faster, so that you don't have all the times that you drill and you end up having, you find nothing. But that you really, in their case, were able to turn around and create, a 50% improvement on the simulations, and therefore having more accuracy. And then as they train the systems and they're more accurate, they train the systems more, and they continue to be more and more accurate. Again, we were able to help them move that code so that they could try out different architectures that are better for onshore or offshore, depending on how far someone is from the connectivity that they might need. All of that is really important when you're looking at how to best leverage artificial intelligence. So think about performance. Here's a great example of an AI technology leader in China called HiHi. And they basically, again, Intel leveraged our deep learning capabilities that we have, i.e. we build instruction sets within our processors that artificial intelligence applications can take advantage of. And here's an example where they did. And they were able to use this to help with medical imaging and basically diagnose a number of additional diseases, including COVID-19. SK Telecom is another great example in South Korea. They manage more than 400,000 cell towers, over 27 million subscribers. This network handles 1.4 million transactions every second and records every second. So think about the data. We talk about, I think some people coin data is the new oil. So this is a great example of gathering more and more information and really wanting to ensure that you've built an end-to-end network and to have an end-to-end artificial intelligence pipeline. So you're collecting that data, you've got all those cell towers, you are making sure that you've got that information, and then you are leveraging all the, I'll call them analytic zoos or other predictive products that you're using, whether you're building them from like a TensorFlow framework, or maybe you're just leveraging an application like Apache Spark or something like that. All of this is, again, a way that you can streamline and ensure that you're providing the best services for the telecom users. So here's an example that I honestly worked on in my role as a chief data scientist for public sector. This is work that we have been doing and have been involved with the US government for a number of years. Intel itself, honestly, is 52 years old. And so we have been involved for quite some time working with government, civilian agencies, the Department of Defense, et cetera. But we honestly build an ecosystem. So we build processors and software that allow folks to be able to take on the capabilities of artificial intelligence and leverage all of that data to have actions and actionable interpretation much faster. But we do that, again, through partners. So C3 AI was one of those, including a broader ecosystem of OEM, original equipment manufacturers, that really enabled a best of breed solution. So what was going on here was they needed to ensure the traceability to help keep track of food in the supply chain. And they needed to ensure that the accuracy, the withdrawal and recall of unsafe food was tracked in the right way. It's a requirement. It absolutely needs to be audited, audit traceable, et cetera. So the more information that was being kept, the easier and the quicker it is to identify those affected foods. So they wanted to ensure to mitigate risk, and in the end, using things like blockchain, predictive models, leveraging predictive models with news source information, social media, other regression techniques, we were able to predict and find issues, within the supply chain 100 times faster, which meant you get the food off the shelves faster, you get them out of the hands of children, you get them out of the hands of all of us that are on the line, and save lives. So you're probably wondering why I'm highlighting all those examples and how it relates to bias. Well, these were all successful projects with a diverse team, delivering the solution, integrating the data, interpreting the results. So again, let me set a little bit more context. In 2018, many of the CSPs like Google and Amazon and Microsoft were shown to have bias built into their models. First, the training sets were not diverse. So you start from the beginning of, you have a premise. In this particular case, they were doing facial recognition, and they wanted to get the broadest training set that they could so that the facial recognition was more accurate. So this training set, they use photos of US government, parliament, and other government agency officials to train the model and to help them with the results. And then they reinforced to have the models more accurate. So you're probably thinking, well, data and numbers and algorithms and photos are all supposed to be neutral, right? Well, ultimately, this was no surprise because Joy Balawami, who's a researcher at MIT Media Lab, illustrated the built-in bias in her documentary titled Coded Biased. Feel free to watch that. It's awesome. I have the reference at the end. She illustrated the fact that these photos that they used were not representative of the world. They might have been representative of who was in government, but they sure were not representative of the entire planet. And as she illustrated, these biased algorithms can lead to real world inequities. The example above, as I said, I don't think it was malicious. I just think it was uninformed. And they didn't leverage all the multiple photographs that they could have gotten from maybe Library of Congress, maybe from social media, et cetera. And truthfully, it's been shown by adding diversity in your staff and on your boards increases your market share. So Harvard Business had a study which showed in Western Europe, they had a number of companies that they surveyed, and they showed that with a 10% increase in the ratio of women to men in the workforce, that correlated to a 7% increase in market share. And within AI, the importance of diversity is critical. Having women have been well documented that really builds a better and effective AI system, including defining the problem, selecting and preparing the data inputs. Example, as I mentioned, where they didn't think about that. Again, I don't think it was malicious in the initial cases where they just went out to somewhere where they could get all of those photographs. I just, again, think it was uninformed. So having women and having a really diverse group of people, men, women, all involved in this will better help and select, as I said, and prepare the data inputs. It will be better in terms of constructing and training the algorithms. And the AI team, I think, and it's been proven in a 2020 World Economic Forum study, that the fact that you're doing work as it relates to the population, that it's really important that you have a diverse group within the population of the team that you're leveraging. And since half of the world's population is female, it just makes a lot of sense. So here are additionally some numbers in terms of what we're seeing today for women in the future, some of the forecasts, some of the challenges, including the fact that in many of the universities and the programs that have AI tenured track positions, that 16% of those are women. So you're not always seeing the same set of people that would be the people that are going to benefit from those results. I wanted to just highlight that, Intel's had a long history of leadership around this. I won't go through all of this, but just that we have been really committed to our responsibility, our corporate sustainability, and we build that on transparency and governance and ethics. And deeply ingrained in all of this is ensuring that we have that the face of Intel looks like the face of the planet, and that our commitment is really to ensure that what we build and the world-changing technology that we build enriches the lives of every person on the earth, not just one group or another group, but really everybody. And that we really, in the case of AI, that we really democratize it. And that as I talked about earlier, in terms of the benefits, think about the World Economic Forum, and think about the World Health Organization and others that are really working hard to advance the progress of these kind of complex issues together. And it's always centered around ensuring that women and children are part of those teams, and that are the people that will ultimately bring a better mix that will provide us the best resources and the best results. And that it's really important to ensure that through all of your artificial intelligence operations, that you really have built in that diversity. Again, here's some specifics about this year. Again, I won't go into all of them, but we've spent, I believe this was the 10th year that we were listed as one of the most ethical companies. Employees, we are encouraged to volunteer, and lots of us do. Even despite COVID-19 challenges, we still had almost 1 million hours in 2020 in terms of volunteer, and that we have ultimately pushed our goals even farther in terms of our strategy and how we want to be inclusive and ensure that we're enabling all of the STEM readiness to any underserved community. You had, if I'm not mistaken, Ansel from our global education organization come talk about the programs that we're building. And we have, an AI for K through 12 or primary schools. We've also developed AI programs for community colleges. We are, and I'm involved in doing some development for the next set of curriculum and courses that will be available. Again, we're really focused on ensuring that we democratize AI, and that you don't have to go to, the top schools. And I'm not saying that these programs aren't really good and well developed, because they are, but the idea is having the most data savvy workforce is just so important, and ensuring that even if you're not a data scientist or somebody working every day in artificial intelligence, there's data in every job that you will do today and in the future. And so ensuring that we have a data savvy workforce is really important. So Intel's RISE strategy, as we call it, and we want everyone to rise, is that we are focused, our commitment, as I said, is to have the right global impact and ensure that as we create this world-changing technology, that we do it in the way that it enriches people and doesn't do anything that's ill-informed or malicious. So we want to ensure that we're being responsible. We want to ensure that we're being inclusive. We want to ensure that we're being sustainable. To build the processors and much of what we have, it starts with sand. There's a lot of water, there's a lot of chemicals, there's other things that are part of this. So we really want to ensure that our progress with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increase our use of renewable energy, reducing our water use, and at all times advancing our workforce diversity and inclusion, driving these really responsible supply chain practices, and enabling that we give back to our local communities. And through all of this, we have launched, as I said, our RISE goals, and we will continue to monitor those and be responsible and inclusive and create the sustainable future and enable that our technology is available for everyone, no matter what your socioeconomic background is. I wanted to just highlight and connect back to what I had in terms of the UN, where we really have thought through, the different initiatives that the UN has. And again, these are just some that touch what we're doing in terms of, good health and well-being, quality education, reducing inequities. We really want to ensure that through our supply chain, through industry initiatives that we do, where we are building our new fabrication plants, that we do that in a way that is sustainable, that our value chain is always thought of highly, and that we ensure that we leverage artificial intelligence through much of what we're building, that we have, as I said, from a supply chain yield perspective. We also have much robotics built into our manufacturing facility and the clean rooms. But all in all, we want to make sure that we do this responsibly, and that we also do that responsibly when it comes to the different minerals that we source. So we have also added diversity and inclusion components when we're purchasing from third parties, that we ensure that they also have similar goals as we do, and that we ensure that we are looking at the most diverse group of people that we can, and companies and corporations that we can work with. So we want to expand any of the efforts that we have beyond conflicting materials to cover all materials that are used in the semiconductor manufacturing, and we will continue to do that. As I mentioned, diversity and inclusion are core to our values, core to my values, I think core to, as I said, everyone at Intel, and then all the people that we work with around the planet. We take action to ensure that we have inclusivity and accountability, that we measure those around our performance. We have solid management systems and compensation programs and hiring processes and all of that ensure that we are always focused on reducing those inequities. And during 2020, we continue to strengthen these systems and processes and programs to drive diversity and equity and inclusion throughout our workforce. We set new milestones and targets to accelerate the progress towards our senior leadership having better representation, linking those metrics to our executive employee compensation. And at the end of 2020, 25% of our technical roles were held by women. I happen to be a technical female at Intel, but still not fully representative. So again, we are working higher to not only have more women in technical roles, but also ensure that we have folks that are, and that we have the right components, I shouldn't say components, that we have the right mechanisms built in for disabled and any other persons that are self-identified and or ensure that we're building that diversity and inclusion. As I mentioned, we spent a lot of time and money last year working with diverse suppliers. So building into the contracts and things that we have with our suppliers, ensuring that they have similar processes and that we are working with diverse and minority-owned suppliers across the globe. We have even more numbers, i.e. percentages that we're trying to reach by 2030. We also ensured that we spent more money with US Black-owned suppliers, and we will be looking at that more globally. We recognize that diverse suppliers as businesses, there are still less than 51% kind of ownership, operated and controlled. but we are focused on women and minorities as recognized by the countries where the businesses are, and that we will be leveraging and focusing on that as we move to 2030. And sustainability is really important to us. As I said, you start with the processes and the chemicals and the other things about building in our manufacturing, but it is really a long-standing commitment for environmental leadership. We want to advance our efficiencies. We're working on reducing costs. We're using artificial intelligence and sensors throughout our buildings to turn on and off the lights when we need them and don't need them. We absolutely are looking at how are we reducing and ensuring no greenhouse gas emissions, water usage. As I said, we also work to ensure that the handprint, I'll call it, of our technology reduces climate impact across the globe. Again, and that it's affordable and clean. So trying to connect back to the UN work that has been done. When you think about artificial intelligence and the entire process, and here's think through the machine learning process, it's really, as I said, important to ensure that you've got diversity throughout that. As I just illustrated at Intel, we're working hard to reduce inequities, increase our workforce diversity, and as mentioned in that previous session from Ansul Sonak, we're focused on democratizing AI. And we're doing that, as I said, through strong curriculum at all levels. So at Intel, how we think about this is public awareness. So we have programs around AI for citizens. We think about high school and primary school through, as I mentioned, the program AI for Youth. We think about vocational skilling, and that's really AI for future workforce. But at the same time, there's on-the-job training and there's reskilling. So we have AI for current workforce. And we also want to ensure that the leaders of any and all organizations are ready to interpret and work with artificial intelligence and work with any and all of those pipelines, whether it be structured data that's in databases and information that you're collecting as a company or as a volunteer organization, and then also leveraging unstructured social media and other data gathering that can be leveraged to ensure that you're providing the best services for the citizens, the best services for your volunteers, the best services for any of the constituents that you have. And as I mentioned, we have a leadership ready or digital readiness for leaders. And within that, diversity is, again, really critical. The picture illustrates the value of thinking through the diverse data sets, a diversity of team, interpretation, and where and why and when you need to have women in AI. You need that involved in the data preparation. As I mentioned earlier with the inaccuracies around facial recognition and some of the work that was done through a number of the cloud service providers, if they had had a diverse group involved in that conversation, the data prep and where they got the data and the images or the text or the structured, unstructured would have had a different group of people with different experiences and different ideas, and probably would have not had the results that were disastrous initially. And then when you think about looking at the features that are important and the feature extraction and the data mapping and ensuring that you're looking at the right information when you're building those pipelines and looking to solve those problems. Again, having a diverse group looking at the different features. Well, is this one important? Well, wait a minute, we're looking at a group of people that are specifically part of a let's say, a small team of people that is trying to pull information that is giving you the COVID research example as I had earlier, or looking at the food safety. If you had people who are not only have children, but think about the children of the children, or who are looking at it from a perspective of, well, when somebody's really busy, they might not be reading all the information that they might need to. So how quickly can we get that off the shelves? Or is there information from local newspapers that might be of help? Or is there something specific to this product and how it's built that we need to get some additional information? Again, having that kind of discussion in your team is exactly what you need to ensure that you're building the best models, and that you're providing the best training data, and that you're then having really good information from a prediction or an interpretation perspective, that you then have people with diverse backgrounds looking at that and understanding that even though this is really a time-consuming process, and that is a big challenge, that having the diverse group evolving and reviewing and interpreting is something that's really helpful. And as I said, there are multiple steps involved, from data preparation to feature extraction, to training the models, to testing, to inferring, to interpretive improvements, then putting that information back into the model and building again, potentially looking at multiple models and weighting those differently depending on the specific problem that you're looking at. So these tools, can really help you when it comes to the end-to-end continuum, but many of the ways that this is built today, the software and the hardware and the data is disparate. It's not fully part of a continuum. And so not integrating diversity of thought as a way to potentially help remove bottlenecks honestly doesn't make any sense. It's really helpful to ensure that with that group, you're absolutely gonna, with the diverse group, you will, and having women involved, you will increase the data practitioners' productivity, because that would have been built in. You'll ensure that bias is not risking, honestly, a reputation of a volunteer organization or the reputation of a company, or having that potentially, or even at a worst case, having your organization or your company or the people that are part of this face some regulatory fines, or potentially even being shut down. So having everybody not only in this process, but as part of the interpretation and as part of the, let's say, presentation, once those results are defined through this entire process. If you have a data savvy workforce, this is a great example of why you want to develop the skills and how you're going to create opportunities, and why having women in AI is really important, and the best way to partner and create the right framework and environment to reduce and maybe even eliminate a bias by having them. The next slide is an example of some tools and products that we Intel build, again, to help with the democratization, and to also ensure that we are providing tools that can help our businesses and customers get answers faster. So we created something called One API, and it basically is a software set of tools and frameworks and libraries, specifically one called the Deep Neural Net library. All of the work that we've done is open sourced, so know that it's available to anybody. We've done a lot of these optimizations. You can just go out to GitHub and type in Intel and see probably more than 1,000 at this point that are optimized and ready, including frameworks like TensorFlow. So that means that when you develop anything in TensorFlow, that it's already optimized and it will take best advantage of the performance that you can get from our processors, whether you're running it locally, whether you're using it in your data center, or you're leveraging cloud providers, most of which have Intel within the cloud. Almost all of them do. And so when you optimize this, it gives you a better, call it highly tuned set of API primitives that speed up this neural net execution. And as I said, the library is open source, and you can use this library on a CPU, central processing unit, i.e. Intel Xeon, and truthfully other competition, whether it be a graphic processing unit, GPU, but all of it is optimized to ensure that you get the maximum performance on an Intel processor. But even with our competing processors, you will still get as good, if not better, performance. But this is an example of one of the tools. So again, Intel builds the processors. We want to make sure that you have the best libraries and compilers and sets of tools to be able to build and or leverage something like SAS or C3 or other applications that run on top, who have also worked really closely with us and take advantage of that. So there is a plethora of products out there and softwares and libraries and tools, all of which we want to make AI development easier, AI usage faster, and again, think of it as ways to democratize AI. Another way is that, as I said, we partner with organizations, and we absolutely want to partner with organizations that promote diversity, especially in startups. There are not enough women in startups or women in venture capital. And you may not know this, but Intel has a organization, well, it almost sounds like it's something separate, but it isn't. It's Intel Capital. And last year we invested over $2 billion in AI companies. And for us, as I said, the partnership is key. And Women in AI is a great example of how we continue to broaden and ensure that we want to partner with these kinds of organizations. So Women in AI is, while it's based in the US, and the work that we have done with them in terms of a 6-month program is in the US, but the truth is they have representation from all over the globe, and will continue to broaden. They have over 5,000 folks that are involved, myself and others, but really it was based on the fact, as I had mentioned on Deloitte and McKinsey and others, that women-led companies are more likely to prioritize the social responsibility initiatives, i.e. caring about the planet, and thinking about serving underserved communities, and connecting those to the UN priorities is really important. But as this shows you, there are not a lot of women that are involved, and especially when we think of private technology companies, those run by female produce even higher return on investment. And so when you look at, there's something that I live in New England, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and there's something called the Mass Challenge, and the Boston Consulting Group and others are really working hard to ensure that there's more and more women in venture capital organizations and also in venture capital backed startups. We have prioritized women and underserved minorities, and invested more in Black entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs, and invested in historically Black colleges in the United States to ensure that we are getting more and more representation, which is so critical to ensure that you are producing better and better and more accurate results from an artificial intelligence perspective. And the Women in AI Accelerate program was just one that was phenomenal, and I was delighted to be part of it, help kick it off, but really looked at this whole process of thinking about a startup. What's the ideation? I mean, there were people that looked at, the creation of and leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to create better beauty products for women of color. There were folks that were looking at leveraging even more artificial intelligence and machine learning to help the teaching process and the program and project management process to ensure faster time to solution. There were examples of looking at different ways to find and discover drugs focused on certain types of cancer. There were just a plethora of wonderful examples and ideas that came to fruition. There were, I don't know the exact number, but you can go and look on the Women in AI webpage, and I have some information at the end on a resource page. But they really went through that process of ideation. There were folks like myself and others, from the venture capital company, from Google, from Johns Hopkins University, from corporations like McKinsey or Deloitte and others that were part of the mentoring. So once the application and review happened, then there was mentoring and matchmaking, and folks developed the business idea and the plan and how would you leverage AI and machine learning. And then they had, as they termed it, a hackathon in June, where they really presented those ideas and walked through, had some venture capital folks that were listening. And then right now they're going through additional pitch and fundraising and full demos. And it's just, it's phenomenal. And the work that's being done, again, through this organization is exactly what needs to happen. This is a phenomenal illustration of a public-private partnership where there are a ton of really brilliant volunteers and wonderful people that are part of this. Companies, that I'd mentioned, plus others. You have Intel leveraging some funding to provide additional, I'll call it jumpstart monies for folks. It's just really important that we ensure that we have women in AI, and it is really a worldwide imperative. There's a picture here of honestly, mom and daughter that are part of one of the programs that Intel has, one of our community colleges, where the mom and daughter are together learning and taking a certification. In this case, it's a 2-year program from Maricopa. So artificial intelligence systems today increasingly determine whether someone gets a job, a loan, how much they're paid, how they're treated by doctors, how fairly they're dealt with by the government, by law enforcement. If AI is behind these kinds of automated decision-making systems, not having a full representation of the people that are part of or the receivers of those decisions almost ensures bias. And they're more likely to discriminate against people on the basis of race and religion and sex and other criteria. And the problem can be really difficult to weed out. AI's profound bias problems, honestly, have been publicly highlighted. Thanks to researchers like Joy, who I mentioned earlier, the MIT research, and Tamnit Gebru. She was an author of a study in 2018, showed all the facial recognition algorithms always identified white males by recognizing Black women only, 2/3 of the time. And the consequences of that flaw, how serious those are in law enforcement, and using those algorithms. And as an example, she was part of the AI and the AI ethics and the whole work that was being done at Google. And Google, honestly, they recently fired her. And there are other resignations from people at Google AI related to some of this, I'll call it prickly topic. And it is something you're seeing in the news, but I also think it's an opportunity. It's really a way for us to build in and ensure that we have that diversity now, and that it's a chance for businesses and data scientists and engineers and people to really root out and begin this hard but important work of extracting bias from AI data sets and algorithms, and eventually from our society. I don't want to be too Pollyanna-ish. I know the truth is the diversity is central to ensuring that you're getting the right results. And at the same time, I think the future is pretty exciting. I think there are definitely things that we can and should fix. But I also do think that we want to make sure that we are unknowingly introducing any bias. And the best way to do that, since 51% of the planet is women, is to ensure that women are part of this from the beginning, part of that pipeline, part of thinking about the data sets and what is the problem and how do we do that. And with that, I'm going to hit my last slide, honestly. And so building these diverse teams, as I said, is the best way to ensure the reduction and potential elimination of bias. And it's definitely something we're striving for today, in the future. And here are some honestly fabulous resources. And feel free, I have my Intel email address, my Twitter handle, any LinkedIn details. Feel free to reach out to me, just general discussions, or if you want information out about our product or solutions. But as I mentioned, education and work programs, there's information there. The Deloitte Women on AI. I happen to be lucky enough to be asked to be part of that and contributed to it. The Women in AI initiative that I mentioned earlier, that we have partnered, and as I said, is such a brilliant public-private partnership. Our overall goals and how we're doing, not only do we want to aspire to be even better than we are also measuring it. We are engineers, we are data driven, so we want to make sure that we're doing a better job. The Women's Economic Forum, there's information on the Women in AI and what they said. And then, as I had mentioned, Joy's documentary is on Netflix. It's called Coded Bias, and it's really important. So as I said, Women in AI is critical for effectiveness. It's needed quickly, and I truly believe it does have a bright future. And with that, I will say again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity and asking me to talk and present. And we have a little bit of time left in case there are any questions. So again, thank you.
That was very insightful, Gretchen. Honestly, we are flooded with questions here, and we'll try our best to see how much we can actually make time for. We have Asia Adams from Cape Town, South Africa. She actually is asking, how does one go about to collaborate or discuss synergies? Are there any portals from Intel which they can go ahead and try to connect with, apart from how to connect with you in the social media, is there any other way to collaborate, is what RCA Adams is asking from South Africa?
Yeah, we have, well, for one, there's the Women in AI initiative itself, and I will send and post these slides with your help, and they have hot links. So if you want, what I can do is put these hot links together, and we can just have them on the page. But there's at intel.com, there's information about education. There's information on our new startup programs. You can just go out to intel.com. And again, there's the Women in AI initiative also. But you can also reach out to me, any and all of the above.
Okay. We have Malala asking for any specific support for women professionals to transition into an AI career.
Yeah, so we have the Women in AI or excuse me, the AI workforce program. So these are online courses that you can take. There's also Intel has a development cloud. So basically a free of charge cloud. You just go and sign up, and you can take the tutorials on designing in Python or leveraging some of the different data sets that we have available, and look at the sensors and the at the edge products, and do some testing and just learn. So again, I can include those pointers with your help, Ram and team, for the developer cloud, and again for the curriculum to help create the data savvy workforce.
Sure, Gretchen. We'll actually add it in the description of the YouTube session where people can actually go ahead and reach out. We have Ashok asking, how is the women in AI versus women in jobs and professional in general, like, in terms of percentage, do you have any hard numbers to show for?
Oh yeah, really good question. So in terms of women in AI, we, as I mentioned, overall, it's less than 25%, but the number of women in the workforce is, depending on which study you look at, is anywhere between 43 and 47% of the workforce. So there's definitely a lot more women in the workforce, but they're definitely not in technical and artificial intelligence, machine learning kinds of positions.
Yeah, the next question is how to access. I could sense it in the last part of your presentation. We're talking about, is there any way to access Intel Capital Fund for women who are into the startup ecosystem?
Yes, absolutely. I can again provide you with the Intel Capital web information, but they can absolutely reach out to me, and I can connect them directly with the team that evaluates AI products. I work with them regularly, and honestly, one of my mentors, Melvin Greer, who is the chief data scientist of our entire organization, sits and works directly to ensure that there are more diverse, underrepresented minorities and women as part of that. So, just drop me an email, and then I also will provide to you as a follow-on the web site for AI Capital or Intel Capital.
Sounds good, Gretchen. We have Sujay asking if at all this bias in not just in AI, is it pertaining to other opportunities also? Is there any country where you feel that, this is most significant, like in terms of where it's very skewed in terms of like lack of opportunity for women in their workforce? Any particular places like numbers?
Yeah, that's honestly a really good question. And I don't know. That is a fabulous question. I do know that we as a company are trying to do more in India, are trying to do more in other places around the globe by where we're putting our fabrication plants, and the programs that we're creating, internships and mentorship programs. But that's a really good question, and I'll scribble it down, and I will provide any additional information that I have and I can find for everybody who's on the line.
I think his question was actually on India.
Well, we're doing a lot there, so yes. So yeah, just again, gretchen.stewart@intel.com, and I can get you connected to folks in India, because we have a number of facilities and fabrication plants, etc. So we definitely, there's opportunities to make those connections.
Yeah, one more question, Gretchen, is like,
sure.
Intel has a ongoing program with the governments as well, wherein they're working with the Indian schooling system, with the central boards here, where they want to bring in the curriculum which is more favorable to get into the data science and AI careers. is there some kind of such programs even with in terms of bringing in more women into the workforce kind of thing, like as an initiative from where you're working with the states?
Yes, so great question. So in the United States, we have been, I think there's about 18 states in the United States that we're working directly with. One that I'm involved with that we're just starting, honestly, is the state of Alabama. And we are having conversations with the community college system to leverage the curriculum that we have and have that as part of the community college system and use it as a I'll call it a feeder program. So once you do the curriculum within 2 years that and you have C or C plus kind of grades, that you then have a great opportunity to go maybe to the University of Alabama or other universities. So you can take that 2 year and go to a 4-year school, if that makes sense. But we're also partnering with some of the local companies that are around some of these community colleges also. So our AI for Workforce on Intel's website is a great place to look and see the different programs and the different states where we have this involved. New Jersey is another one, Pennsylvania, California, Arizona. So we're not in all the states, but we're definitely doing the best that we can to help educate the workforce and provide that to anyone who's interested at any socioeconomic space.
Thanks, Gretchen.
You're welcome.
Fernando Bellarmino asking, are there any use cases of AI used in COVID, in the COVID situation, or any solutions which came out of any AI use cases, especially from what Intel is working with in the COVID,
great. Yep, great question. And yes, Intel honestly created the pandemic response fund. So we put multiple millions, I think it was $300-400 million into a fund to help speed up exactly what is being asked. And so we were able to help with some rapid testing. So the building of rapid test that are at airports. And then we also worked with a company, multiple companies, but one that I can think of off the top of my head is a company called Medtronics. And we worked with them to help ensure that they were taking a lot of background data and x-rays so that you knew the difference between COVID in the lungs versus, some flu and things like that, where help to get them access and almost create I'll call it COVID data lake of a lot of that information to help speed up the research. And so, yes, we've done that from, providing the cloud capabilities so that somebody can add multiple data sets to be able to leverage those. We did that honestly in concert with C3 as an example, and the cloud service providers, because as I mentioned, Intel really is part of all of them, whether they be, Baidu, Tencent, Google, Amazon, Azure. We are all, Intel is part of all of those. So we worked hard, and we honestly have leveraged and taken that pandemic fund to now be part of the greater good in the RISE 2030 strategy that I mentioned. So there is funding available for if you've got a great idea and think that can absolutely help. We definitely have funds available to help kickstart that kind of thing.
I guess we have.
I think we're at time.
Yeah, that's a pity. But then, thank you so much for your time, Gretchen. I know it's like real early for you, the eastern side.
Oh no, it's 8:30 in the morning. It's all good.
Yeah, but still, thank you for taking your time out from your schedule to come and address us. And it was an absolute blast here for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the opportunity. And please, as I said, building diverse teams is the best way we can assure that we reduce or potentially eliminate the bias. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Thank you everyone for joining in, and we'll keep you posted on our upcoming webinar series from IABAC. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye,
Thank
Gretchen.
you.